This is a really interesting show, and it came across my radar when Tanya and I were having a fantastic discussion, and I cannot wait to introduce you to Tanya. I want to start with whether or not we're interviewing for a job, we're trying to close a sale, or we're even building a new business partnership to take us into someplace like a new market or to reach a new segment of potential clients. We have hoops to jump through. These hoops aren't frivolous at all. In fact, they're really necessary. And I'm curious if we are able to use the same skills for all of those things and figure out how to make our personal values and our company culture shine through. I'm Jessica Dewell, and you're listening to The Voice of Bold Business. Today, we're talking about how you can be the judge. To discuss this with me is my co-host for this episode, Tanya Bourque, and our guests, Amy Miller, Bruce Hurwitz, and Angela Solomon. We will meet them in just a few minutes. I want to call a spade a spade. We all judge. Is there really anything wrong with that? In just a few moments, we'll find out from our guests.
Welcome to The Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Okay, Tanya, how is it going? I know you were just at a conference. What was that like?
That was great. I just came back from SourceCon and learned a lot of new things, met a lot of people, had an opportunity to see what the next year is going to bring us as far as technology as well.
Technology is one of my favorite things, and how we use it is pretty stinking amazing. So how does it relate? Did you pick up any tidbits that helped you go, this is what I want to try and take away from our conversation today with Bruce and Amy and Angela?
While there's a lot of focus on what the candidate's doing wrong in interviewing, I'm learning that, because there aren't a lot of people that fit certain skills, there's a lot of things that recruiters and companies are doing to rework things to attract candidates. So while I know today's focus is more on what candidates are doing wrong and what they should do to fit in, I think companies are starting to reverse that attitude and starting to reverse their thinking to attract the right talent.
So then the title of this show, You Be the Judge, is really appropriate. I'm excited. I like that. Okay, so let's meet our panel. I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to introduce, and I definitely am going to be reading at this point because I want to get it right and say everything I wanted to say to best represent our amazing guests. First is Amy Miller, who has spent more than 10 years in agency recruiting, staffing, everything, every situation, and placement for truck drivers to CFOs. After a detour in public service as an employment counselor with the state of Washington, my dear hometown of the Pacific Northwest, lived there for a long time, she came back to recruiting on the corporate side with Zones Inc., and now she's at Microsoft, where she recruits data scientists and machine learning engineers. Bruce Hurwitz is the president of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing, and he's a recognized authority on career counseling, recruitment, and employment issues. His posts have garnered national and international media attention, including appearances on Fox Business Network, Headline News, also known as CNN, and the local New York Fox affiliate, as well as mentions on Good Morning America. Angela Solomon infuses her bold personality and cultural differences to offer a unique blend and extensive breadth of experience in the recruiting and career coaching industry. She's been involved in the corporate agency and recruiting industry for 20 years, placing the best and finest Wall Street executives worldwide. I have to tell you, Tanya, I couldn't have asked for a better group of guests today. So thank you, because I know you have a connection and reached out to all of them. So this is really amazing. You mentioned about getting a job and the technologies and how people, what candidates need to think and what businesses need to think about. And as and everybody here except for me is in the recruiting world, which I love. So I'm going to probably have a few comments and thoughts that are outside of the norm, which is okay, because I know each of you will kindly put me in my place, or maybe even just with a little bold sassiness. I don't know. as we go along. So let's start off the conversation. This is 2016, and times are changing. There's more competition for jobs than ever before, and there's more competition to keep our jobs than ever before. And when we're recruiting, when I'm looking at adding members to my team, and you guys will tell me if this is similar for you, we're not only recruiting for the best attitude and fit for the organization, we're recruiting for the skills, but we're also recruiting for longevity. Who do we want to invest additional monies in for training to keep them with us? So let's talk about this. What does it take to land a job, solidify a new partnership, or bring in a new client?
I think it takes personality. I think it takes courage. I think it takes fortitude. And I think it takes entrepreneurial spirit in order to advance yourself in this industry these days. Like you said, there's a big market. There's a lot of candidates looking. It's a very competitive market, and there is a war on talent, and identifying the right kinds of people. I know for me, I specifically focus on Wall Street, and I work on a lot of investment banking jobs. And what I look for in candidates is their track record. I look for some stability, because a lot of people now jump from job to job. I also look at whether or not they're entrepreneurial spirited, and whether or not they're driven to get to that next step. And I think that's a lot of what my clients look for, which are the investment banks.
Who else wants to jump in?
So I think I have a little bit of a different perspective and experience here. I work for a large tech company. Obviously, we have a very different idea of what it's more of a war for talent, I think, as opposed to a war on talent. So, it's very competitive, and I don't think I've made an offer to an engineer in the last 6 months who hasn't had more than one competing offer. So for us, it's more like, first of all, it starts with really focusing on screening in versus screening out. So looking for the reasons why this person maybe could add something to our team. And I think also it's getting out of the groupthink. It's getting away from this idea that, my next hire has to fit in this certain box. We have to dismantle that box, and we have to look at how does this hire potentially add something to the team that we don't already have. Yes, there are things that they need to be able to do. They have to be able to write code. They have to be able to either already know or learn a certain technology. They have to be able to perform. But we can't just look at a set of skills and say, check, 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 check. This person fits these boxes, and that makes a good hire. We have to go beyond that, and I think sometimes break culture a little bit.
Well, if I may, I happen to agree with what Amy just said.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Because it's not just looking at the job description, seeing what the qualifications are and the requirements, and then going from there to see about the cultural fit, which is the most important thing. But I looked at the question differently. I looked at it from the perspective of the career counselor. And the first question was, what does it take to get a job? In 2016, or for that matter, 2017, it's the same answer. And what's surprising is if you go to the statistics, if you go to the Department of Labor, you'll see that the unemployment rate for high school dropouts is 7.2%. It's 5.1% for high school graduates. Then it drops down to 4.3% if you've got some college or associate degree. But if you have a bachelor's degree or higher, it's only 2.7%. And that's the first answer. If you want a good job, you need a college degree. But on the other side of that coin, you have the civilian labor force participation rate, which is only 62.8%. It hasn't been that low since 1978. So depending upon the results of the election, if there's a lot of confidence and people believe that jobs are going to be created, which is what we want, that means the unemployment rate will go up. And of these 62.8%, they're going to want to get back into the job market, and we don't know who those individuals are. So my generic, quick answer to the question is, because the focus is on interviewing, you can always assume that if you have been invited for the interview, all of your competition meet the minimum qualifications. You have to be very creative with your questions, with your answers to the questions. You have to prepare like never before, and you have to be flexible. Those are my keys when I'm interviewing someone, either training them as a career counselor or interviewing them for one of my executive recruiting clients.
I think having a really understanding of what it is that you want to do. I, as I'm sure Angela and Bruce do as well, talk to tons of candidates who are not necessarily a fit for my team, my company. I mean, I talk to even non-engineers sometimes and just try to provide perspective and how to, answer these questions that we're talking about. And, the worst thing for me and what kind of almost stops me in my tracks and kind of keeps me from helping someone is when the response is, well, I'll do anything, or I don't, it's like, well, I don't know how to help you do anything. So I think understanding whether it's a very specific career path, if you want to go into tech, you want to go into sales, you want to work with your hands, whatever that is, degree may or may not be required, technical training, things like that. A lot of variables there. We don't have time to talk about every single one of them, but starting from a place of, I know this is where my strengths lie. And then going down that path is really the best advice I would be able to give.
I agree with you, Bruce, as well. I think what candidates fail to do is prepare for interviews. Yeah. And that's where the biggest problem lies, because the resume is what gets you through the door, but it's the interview that seals the deal. So if you don't have, if you're not studying the company you're interviewing for, if you don't have a grasp on what you want to do, then that's where the problem lies. So I think people have to dig down deep and get to know, like you said, Amy, where your strengths lie the most, and see what you're good at, and then what you're most passionate about, and then take it from there.
All of you said a variation of what, Angela, you just summed up, which is we need to study the organizations that we're approaching, which happens for interviews, which also happens for client relationships and building, new clientele in the sales process, as well as strategic partnerships to break into other markets or expand operations or do whatever else needs to be done. So studying the organizations. So what are your tips? Do each of you guys have a tip that says, or I wish people I talked to had done what before they come talk to you when they're looking for to join a specific company versus possibly knowing their path?
Yeah, I work for a company that has over 100,000 employees. Right. You can imagine the number of job postings we have on a daily basis. So if someone, especially if they're outside of my very narrow slice of that company, is coming to me and saying, hey, I really want to work as an accountant for Microsoft, as an example. I've never had that question, but let's just pretend. Okay. I don't know what to do with that, right? So even just something as simple as saying, hey, I saw this very specific job ad. This is a posting that I feel like I'm qualified for. Can you help me get connected to the right team? Fantastic. You've given me something that's really pretty easy and something I can work with, versus this very general, like, hey, here's, my expertise. I'm an accountant and I'm going to throw my resume on your lap and want you to do something with it. That's a much more difficult thing for me to try to take on, because this is really, as I'm sure, any working recruiter will say, this is an add-on. This is almost kind of volunteer work outside of our day job. So the easier you can make it for us and the more direct and specific your ask is, the more likely we are to be able to help you.
Building on that, the number one mistake that I have found job seekers make is that they focus on themselves and not on the employer. you always have to be asking, what does the employer want? What is the employer looking for?
Mm-hmm.
When I am speaking, I begin by telling a room full, 50, 100 job applicants, you're not important. You are incidental to your job search. You have to stay focused on the employer. And that doesn't just mean learning the website. That means Googling them, finding press releases, because every question you ask and every question you answer has to show how well you prepare for meetings, which means your research skills.
Exactly, Bruce. I agree. And I think what people fail to realize, especially candidates interviewing, is that employers want to know what's in it for them. What do you bring to the table for them? How can you enhance their bottom line is mostly what employers look for. And I think it's important for candidates, like you said, Bruce, is to do research. I always tell my candidates and I tell people that I counsel, do as much homework as possible about the company. I'm a big believer in 6 degrees of separation and who you may know that works at specific places you're interviewing for to get a sense of what a day in a life looks like for someone. And LinkedIn has been a tremendous resource in getting to know people and learning what kinds of companies you'd like to work for and who the types of people are that work for those firms. So research is very important in preparation.
Amy, if I may ask you a question.
Of course.
First, there was a very good article in, I believe it was Inc. magazine this month. It was either Inc. or Fast Company. I always get confused between the two. I read them both. About your company's new policy for recruiting autistic people.
Yes, we do have a program that, yes.
Kudos for that. I wanted to say that. It's very impressive. If someone can find it, read it. It's excellent. Getting back to what Angela just said about LinkedIn, how would you feel if you've got a first-degree connection on LinkedIn, let's say, you really don't know,
Right.
Up somehow, and they were to send you a message, Amy, I just applied for a position at Microsoft. What can you tell me about the culture? Or can you tell me something about the hiring manager? Or, and I know this one's stupid, but can you put in a good word for me?
Yeah, no stupid questions, only stupid answers, right? That only happens 5 or 6 times a day. So I can definitely tell you my answer to that. I do, whenever possible, I try to respond to everyone. Just, they took the time to send me a note. I want to be mindful of the effort that they've put into even finding me in the first place, let alone crafting a message. I usually will say, hey, thanks for reaching out. Have you already applied? Have you looked at your personal connections? Do you know anyone or have you worked with anyone who works at Microsoft? So like what Angela's talking about with the 6 degrees of separation, and I try to give them some pointers on here's some different ways that you can skin this same cat. Right? And then finally, if they have given me that, and here's the key, here's the specific position that I have applied to. It's requisition number, blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. It takes me 30 seconds to then look up that particular requisition number in our database, find the recruiter name, send that recruiter a quick note, hey, this person reached out to me. If there's any interest, go for it.
Wow.
So that's almost a recommendation.
It's just simply saying, hey, this person reached out. No idea if they're a fit. Don't know them, but here's the information they've shared with me.
So you're basically not necessarily cutting in line, but that's what comes to mind is I figured out a more resourceful way to get to where I want to go.
It can be, but there's a challenge with that, right? Because as much as I'd like to say I can do that, 10, 20, 30, 50 times a day, I may not be able to.
Sure.
So it's one of those things where more often than not, Bruce, and hopefully this answers your question, I get that, hey, I want to work for Microsoft. Can you help me? Not really, and I'll try to provide, a little here, you should try this or you should try that. But in those rare instances, and I mean rare, 2-3 times a month. And remember, I get hit up daily, where someone says, I have drafted this. I had one just last week. A young lady was referred by a Microsoft employee. So she's already gone that route and is trying that side of it. She has applied directly to the position. And she's a marketing person. She's also created this website where she basically gives us a pretty thorough kind of mini presentation on why she's a fit for this particular job. She reached out to me. She explained this whole, situation to me and what she had done. I took that information and said, hey, I don't know this candidate at all. I did end up calling her, spent a few minutes on the phone with her just to get to know her, because I was impressed with her chutzpah. I mean, she was really, to the point, but also very methodical in her approach. So I sent all that to the recruiter and said, my 2 cents based on my 15-minute conversation with her, she's someone we should talk to. Whether she's ultimately a fit for this role or not, I have no idea. It's not my world. I know engineers. I don't know marketing people. But because she did take that time and was so detailed and methodical and really knew her strengths. And I think it almost ties back to our earlier conversation. She knew what she was good at, and she was able to package in a really concise way the impact she could potentially have on her next employer, which, if we're lucky, is hopefully us.
I'm hearing some skills pop up here, and I'm a skills girl. I'm all about core competencies and, the soft skills that we need to do our job well. Because yes, while there's a minimum amount of requirement that is necessary to apply for a job, there's also how do we stand out? And it goes back to the personality aspect that we were talking about early on in the conversation. And so far I've heard research, I've heard resourcefulness, and I've heard courage repeated in our answers. Is there a fourth or a fifth one that not only support the conversation we've had, but also, when you combine all together, go back to the need for personality?
Did you say creative?
Creative. Okay.
I think you have to exude passion. Like Amy mentioned, the candidate that reached out to her in a creative manner, she exhibited, her passion for what she knows and loves. And Amy saw that and, reached out to the other recruiter because of it. And I think if you love what you do, it gleans through in your paperwork. It gleans in your interview. It shows that you genuinely love what you do, and it emanates, to the recruiter you're speaking to, as well as the person you may be interviewing with.
How would you? Okay, so I'm going to slice this a little bit, because on the other side of passion is, I'm going to do what it takes, right? So and there's an element of that in passion. Part of having passion is the unlimited energetic resources to go after what you want. But what if my passion is really, things have changed. I find myself in a unique situation, and now I've got to do whatever it takes to keep a roof overhead and feed my kids and make sure I'm taking care of my aging parents, or whatever the responsibilities of people are outside of that. Is there a place and a time where that goes too far?
Not necessarily. I think drive, you're driven to keep that roof over your head. You're driven to whatever your circumstance is to make things happen. And I think there's a difference between being and doing. And I think that can show as well. If you're a natural
plan, baby, act to plan. That's my hashtag.
Right. I think if you're a natural go-getter, it shows in whatever you do.
Okay. Yeah.
But to your point, Jessica, you can't have a situation, and I've dealt with this, I don't want to think how many times, especially in this economy, when someone's passion comes across as desperation, and that never works.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
You're right about that, Bruce. Yeah. It doesn't work. And, I've had situations like that where people, it's like square peg, round hole, where they just don't fit, but they're trying to make themselves fit into a situation. And it is an act of desperation, but I think it needs to be channeled properly. And I think that's where career coaching and counseling comes in to help people get to that next step.
I agree. I would just add to that. I'd spent a couple of years working for the state of Washington, as was mentioned. And in that office, in that job, we worked with people who had just gotten beat up by the recession. So this is back in 2009 for those who might have been recruiting then. And you remember how painful that was. Yeah, it was. I took a break from recruiting because of that. But it was working with those folks and affected people who were receiving unemployment benefits and helping them get retraining or back into the job market. And we saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of people who literally could not function at the interview level because they were so stressed out. It was that hierarchy of needs. That bottom level wasn't being met. There was absolutely no way they were going to get to some of those higher levels where they could actually show up during an interview or actually close, on a salary negotiation. So that's a really tricky thing. And as career coaches and counselors, sometimes we have to take that step back and say, you know what, hold on, we're not going to talk about job search right now.
Right.
We're going to talk about getting you a place to live, and here's resources and here's places that you can go and things like that. It's a little trickier for someone like me. I'm a corporate recruiter. Obviously, my day job is very cut and dried. But for career coaches or people who are doing that kind of work for a living, I think it's a different scenario, but also a very, very important one that we have to recognize. And I remember a defining moment for me was watching a young lady who was in an abusive situation. She came into our office effectively homeless. She had been, to be frank, beaten up by her boyfriend that morning. She's got 2 little kids in tow. And I looked at my coworker and I said, now, how do we get her ready for work? She's a mess right now. How do we really get her in the frame of mind to go sit at a computer and apply for a job? And she looked at me and she said, exactly. And just the silence that just hung there. So I might be going a little off topic here, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind that every job seeker we're encountering, especially those that are proactively looking for work, there's a driver there. There's something else going on that is not necessarily I'm bored at my already okay job that I don't have to leave. More often than not, there's some other driver going on there, and we have a responsibility as recruiters and career coaches to make sure that we're cautioning our candidates on what to say, when to say it, and how much to say. Not everybody understands it like we do.
I agree. And sometimes, that's where we come in and we're doing more. Recruiters do a lot of coaching, believe it or not. We're learning about our candidates. We're learning about their lives and seeing it unfold and seeing, like you said, what their drivers are for specific positions. Maybe they really need it. It's real talk. Like what you were talking about, the lady that came in that was beat up with her 2 children. That's real talk. That's real life. Sometimes people just need jobs and are at that panic and paralyzed state. Mm-hmm. So how do we help people get over that hump to be able to be in a predicament where they can interview and land a job?
I've had a number of candidates come to me, and when asked the question, why'd you leave your last job? They looked me straight in the eye and said, I was fired. And then I asked them what happened. And they told me in 25 seconds. They didn't break eye contact. And as I was writing down their answer, I looked at their expression to see if they were smiling. Because if they smiled, that was a dead giveaway that they had lied. But they kept their expression. And when I submitted them, I, of course, reported all this to my client, the employer. And when they arrived for the interview, they said pretty much the exact same thing. Obviously not word for word, but 25 seconds, kept it short. They got the job. In other cases, people have talked themselves out of positions because it went from facts to sounding like excuses, being defensive, and nobody's interested in that.
A little bit of drama too, right? So exactly. Okay.
I think it's so important how you craft your story, and you need to prepare yourself. If you were fired from a job, you need to really prepare on how you will go about answering that question when a recruiter like Bruce or myself or even Amy will ask, well, why were you fired from that job? You have to be careful. You can't have diarrhea of the mouth. You can't go overboard. I'm sorry, but you can't. I mean, you can't just, you have to have a concise answers and be able to, structure and frame them properly. And I think, some candidates, they just ramble. And when you ramble, that's a red flag for a lot of clients and even recruiters like myself interviewing you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Well, I was just laughing at the expression.
I know, it's great.
I'm sorry, it's real
That's
talk.
the second best. The best I ever heard was on Fox News when they were having a discussion on whatever. One of the participants said, I believe he was from the South, he said, "You can't put the milk back in the udder." And everybody just started laughing and that ended the conversation. That was it.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. Yeah. And it's one thing I think both Bruce and Angela are spot on. And you have to think sometimes it's less about what you say and more about what the other person hears. And that's a tricky thing. We don't all know that instinctually. It's definitely a learned skill. But I had this with a recruiter that I was mentoring some years ago, and similar situation where she was over-explaining a candidate situation, and I was kind of giving her the look like, stop talking, you know? And later on, when we were discussing it and I was kind of briefing her on, some coaching, she said, "Well, I didn't want to lie." And I said, "Well, it's not a lie. It's, you need to talk about what's relevant. What does the hiring team need to know about this person right now? What any potential impact is this person's past situation?" It was, previous failed interview, that kind of thing. What may or may not be relevant. And so we have to really pick and choose the relevant information and not just diarrhea of the mouth all over.
I like it, Amy. I like it.
So
that's why I think practicing is so important,
Absolutely.
especially for those uncomfortable questions. That's where a counselor or coach or even mirror work. Interviewees should do mirror work and prepare themselves for those uncomfortable questions. How do you go about answering them properly?
You said something that is spot on, and then you went on to something else. You said it's what the recruiter, what the employer hears. You can say one thing, they're going to hear something else.
Sure.
And that happens all the time. The example that I give is my own case. I interview for a position. What are your weaknesses? I said, "I have no sense of direction." Now, I knew what I meant. They didn't, and I didn't realize what they had heard.
Right.
And then I'm answering the next question, trying to figure out why it was so cold in that room.
Right.
All of a sudden. And then I said, let me just explain. When I said no sense of direction, I meant I'm geographically challenged.
That's me too. I'm geographically challenged too.
Once I clarified it, everybody laughed.
Right.
And I got the job. If I had not realized what they had heard, that would have been the end of it.
Yeah.
So it's also an important skill to teach reading body language.
Yes.
But you have to know when something has gone south.
Yeah.
You don't have to know why or what it is, but
Sure.
to know, to be able to figure and find your way back. Absolutely.
And I would just, if there's one thing I would leave your listeners with in regards to that, we'll just kind of tag on to Bruce's earlier explanation. A candidate has been fired. They've practiced that, 20-second response as to why they were fired, why they separated from their last job. Some managers may want to probe on that, right? And you've given your explanation. And the manager will say, "Well, can you tell me more about that?" I would encourage my candidates to say, "Can you help me understand what you're looking for that will, why are you asking that question?" And there's better ways to wordsmith that. But I think it's okay to say, "Can you help me understand what you're asking as it relates to me being a fit for this job so that I can give you the right information?" Because I think the instinct would be to just start rambling. And so now you've done your 20-second pitch, right? You've practiced with Bruce, you know what to say, but now they've asked questions and you didn't practice for that. It's okay to put it back on them and say, "I just want to understand what you're asking so that I'm giving you the right information."
I love that. Yes. And that's actually, when do you listen? what do you need to say, which can include questions, and how much to say, meaning don't ramble, be concise, and check in with that body language to make sure that things are on track. And if not, it's okay to stop and ask.
Yes.
Even if it takes a minute to figure out the first question to ask. And I say a minute, really that means seconds, but it's an eternity regardless.
Yeah.
When you're in that moment. All right. Well, the shape of work and the workplace are changing. And this is actually something Tanya and we were talking about as we were crafting the conversation that we were going to have today, and about, the free form of more people working from home, less people working in an office. And does that impact employment opportunities? Does that impact the internal promotion opportunities? And what are your sense of things as you go through your jobs? And I'm going to go back to the stats at the beginning, which I don't remember what the 68% was, but I think that particular stat, if you could repeat
62.8% is the civilian labor force participation rate, which has not been this low since 1978, meaning there are millions of people who just gave up. They stopped looking, and therefore they're no longer part of the unemployment statistics. If, as a result of the election, not talking politics, don't care who wins, whoever it is,
we're in trouble no matter what, right?
if there is confidence, then people will start looking for work.
So this does apply.
What we want to see is the unemployment rate rise, obviously not in November, it'll be too soon, but December or January.
So the more participation is what we're
That's what we want.
What we want. So that, and how does the shape of work, working at home, not working at home, being a consultant versus not being a consultant, being a contract worker or not? And I know all of us have experience with all of those things. So how does that affect? Does that go back to, we just need to know what we need to know when we're talking with somebody, whether that be our boss for an internal promotion, whether that be positioning to figure out who do we need to know to build relationships with, or part of our research to show up and to be able to ask questions and have a good interaction with whomever our first stop talking to the company is.
Yeah, I think, I'll speak to remote work because I'm obviously sitting in my dining room, working from home, not a stitch of makeup on, maybe wearing yoga pants, who knows? Does it hurt me? I don't think so, but then my boss doesn't see me like this, so I don't know. But no, I think it goes back to the culture of the company that you're with. I know even within my organization, it is more accepted in some teams versus others. Some teams have more of that, we need to see your face and you need to be present and involved in things like that, where other teams, and thankfully I'm on one of those teams, understand that I can be just as connected via Skype or IM or what have you. We also have team members that live across the country. So obviously my peer in Texas is not going to come to the office every day. It just doesn't, it's not possible. So, but it's one of those questions that you have to ask early on, either of your recruiter or the person who's helping you get into the organization, and then continuing to vet that throughout your discussions with the hiring team as well. I would just also, one final point I would add to that, I think that we as recruiters have that responsibility to drive that with our companies and with our clients. One of the first questions I'll ask is, if I get that pushback, well, we really need somebody who sits here in Redmond. Well, why is that? How is there a business impact if this person were to sit in Sunnyvale or this person were to sit in Boise, and trying to get them outside of that mindset.
So you're pro changing and more remote workforce.
Absolutely. Especially, if you think about, at least with my organization, and there's caveats abound in regards to these things. Every company has a different perspective and every recruiter has a different perspective. It's ask 100 recruiters or get 100 different answers.
And that's exactly, which is why I have, which is why Tanya and I wanted multiple people on the show, which is why because there's a lot of different flavors, and I'll bet that affects how you screen.
It does, and that's where I keep going back to that screening in, and I've been using that terminology a lot with my hiring teams, where we're a global organization with global clients. How can we effectively serve our global customer base if we are not ourselves global? Mm-hmm. If we are not hiring global talent, if we are not really paying attention to the subtle cultural differences, working styles, even going back to Bruce, what you mentioned about the autism hiring program, even just different ways of working. The way an autistic engineer communicates, or the work style that works for them, or even the location that maybe they're sitting in that works for them, is going to be very different from a marketing person or a PM or something like that. So we have to be very cautious to not come at it with this kind of one size fits all, I need my person to do this and show up here and act like that.
I have had clients who have adamantly refused to hire anyone who was a consultant. They wanted someone who had worked in it, even if they had been unemployed for a while. Didn't matter. They wanted someone who had the experience of working in an office, because the owner of the company saw that as crucial to their corporate culture. It had to be somebody who could fit in, get along with people from different backgrounds, and a consultant working from home can't do that. That's the mentality. Now, in some cases, I could maneuver and manipulate, and in some I couldn't. And if I can't, I can't. It's the employer's company.
Well, and there's another piece to that. There's another piece of the strengths that the person who would be working with these people have or don't have, right? If a leader has strengths that allow for more connected, there's a word, I'm not going to use the right word, being in multiple locations and not needing everybody close. I mean, that's how my team is. My team is spread out across the United States. We're remote from each other. I've also been in teams where we've been in the same location, and my teams in the same location have different challenges than my teams that are remote. And if I'm a leader, I have to really think about, what can I foster? How do I motivate? What is going to help me make sure that these people that are on my team are doing what they need to do, they're being set up for success, and they're actually able to add to the bottom line because they thought they could when they applied for the job. I thought they could when I decided to hire them. Now we got a whole other element that comes in the mix, and maybe it comes down to just the abilities and the desires of, how can I do my job the best for the company, which might mean having everybody in the same place, or it might mean having everybody remote.
And I think, to Bruce's point, that is really the differentiator between what I call a customer service recruiter who takes orders and a talent advisor. Mm-hmm. Because if I am advising you, I'm going to, like Bruce said, I'm going to be coming at you with questions and help me understand why this is a blocker. Help me understand, you feel very strongly that someone who has not worked in a traditional office can't be successful here. Where does that come from? Have you hired people in the past with that background that didn't work out? And so really questioning assumptions and pushing back against bias. We're not going to win every battle, to Bruce's point. I get that. I would love to say I've slayed all these bias dragons. I haven't, but I'm not going to stop trying. And I'm going to keep asking those questions. Just yesterday, I had one where a candidate got really great technical feedback, but there was a concern around the communication. This particular person, when he was writing his code, would stop talking. And the manager was like, I don't know what he's thinking. That's okay. You don't have to know. Some people have that style. And so by pushing back a little bit and saying, help me understand how that blocks work. And, it took us a good 15 minutes, but, we're going to make an offer. So it worked out, but it's one of those things where we have that responsibility, if we're true advisors, to push back on that a little bit and test assumptions.
I agree.
Millennials walking around with the earbuds.
That's true. For me, since I'm focused on Wall Street, it's very traditional, and a lot of people are not allowed to work from home. But I've been pulled into a lot of meetings as an advisor to especially help with getting moms back on Wall Street, getting women back on Wall Street. And how can we go about doing that? By offering flexibility in their work schedules. So those are things that I've been advising my clients to do, to try and come up with some creative solutions in order to get moms to come back to the workplace, or women in general. Been working on that a lot.
Okay, now I'm going to ask a question because it just popped into my head along the same line, and I'm going to call it out. At the beginning, I said a spade is a spade. Well, there are elements to being in person and hiring for a culture and attracting and keeping talent once hiring has occurred internally within an organization, because in my opinion, the definition of an old boys club is changing. The thing is, it's going to be very interesting because there's an Harvard Business Review article that I'm going to post in the show notes from this that talks about, it's a phrase, leapfrog successions, where the person who's being considered for a job is actually 2 or 3 levels below what they're hiring for, not right below, not having been groomed up. So our definition of the club, whether that be a woman's club or a man's club and everybody in between, that's how can we develop our people the best way that we can? How can we find, not only from the interview process, but after they've joined the company, how do we look for those traits that we need? Because to go back to the adaptability and the flexibility, we need to be able to pull people from wherever it makes sense, regardless of where they are in their journey, because it's going to best benefit the customers. It's going to best get our mission as a company, on task and where it needs to go. And we're going to be able to have sustainable results from that. There's going to be a positive result. We're going to make some money. We're going to be able to use that money to do other things, right? So I want to talk about that when we're talking about workplace changing. How does our ability to interact, develop, and really, and I'm going to use the word groom because I think it matters. How do we take people under our wing? How do we let people take us under our wing when we might have different approaches to where we work and how we work and when we work?
So I think for me, I've been very fortunate in my career to have a lot of mentors. And almost every organization that I've been at, prior to starting my own company, I've had some really great bosses who have always asked me, well, what do you want to do next? And how do we lead to that path? And I think companies really have to have strong established career paths. My last organization had a talent map, and it showed you where you would go and how you would go, and what direction you could go in and what it took to get there. And I think going forward with any organization, you need to have that talent map of knowing what it is that you can do and where you can go from there.
I think from the perspective of the employer, what I've seen, and I've worked mainly for nonprofits, but you see somebody who has just completed a project, they've done very well, and then something else comes up, you give them a chance. And that's how they grow. We've had people in the past starting off entry-level positions. You give them a project, they're nervous about it, they ask the right questions, they know what they don't know, they're not afraid to admit that they don't know something, they ask. They have a setback, it doesn't throw them off track, they succeed, then you give them a bigger project, and before you know it, they're in senior management.
I think what Tanya said, that's true, Bruce. And I think what Tanya said is very important too, mentorship programs. I always talk to my clients about having some of the older veterans in the business working with some of the younger, bankers or traders. I work front office, Wall Street, which is the typical trading floors. I'm sure you've seen some of the movies. That mentorship has been lost along the way in recent years because, especially in the industry that I'm in, Wall Street has been getting rid of a lot of the veterans in order to bring in and usher in a new regime and not have to pay those high salaries. honestly, you know, banks are cutting back more and more. And what I'm seeing is the lack of mentorship, which I think is affecting company culture at a lot of these banks because of it. I mean, look at this big Wells Fargo scandal in the news, which is a mess. And I think a lot of it has to do with lying and cheating and stealing, but also a lot of it has to do with lack of mentorship and guidance and proper leadership. And I think that's, you know, it's very important to have those types of programs in place to, you know, talent maps in order to help people get to where they want to be.
I don't know that I'm disagreeing necessarily, because I think Angela and Bruce are both correct, and Tanya are all spot on with that. But I think that we need to really push our candidates and those that we're coaching to have some personal responsibility in their own career development. I think mentorship programs are great. I have an official mentor, but I also have a lot of just kind of homegrown people I've, you know, thrown myself on over the years that I consider to be mentors as well. And I sometimes get more value in those relationships. So it just reminds me of a scenario I had just very recently where a early in career engineer had a non-traditional path into engineering and was concerned about, you know, I don't possess this, you know, kind of cut and dried background. Is that going to impact me, you know, getting into a company like yours? So we talked through that a little bit, and I, you know, tried to give him some tips and, you know, promised to shop his resume and that kind of thing. But I kind of had this light bulb moment, and I said, here's what you really need to do. And so I gave him some very specific guidance, homework, if you will. And using this platform you've already started working on, I want you to go and do this, and I want you to find one person that, you know, has kind of a background or career that you would like to follow, person you want to be when you grow up, right? You go find that person, you reach out, see if you can connect with them, LinkedIn, Twitter, blog, whatever, and then call me back in 2 weeks, let me know how it goes. And the entire conversation shifted. Talk about being in a cold room. You know, I mean, he acted like I asked him to go kick a puppy. You know, he wanted no part of it. It was not comfortable. He said, I don't understand why, you know, I can't just, you know, can't you just get my resume to recruiters? I mean, yeah, but this is your career.
Right.
This is your path, and I'm giving you pearls. I'm giving you some very specific actions that you can take that are going to speed up getting you where you want to go. And he almost seems more passive, like I'm just going to kind of wait for the company to make it happen. So I just want to,
you're right, Amy.
That's what we're suggesting, but I just want to make sure we're cautioning against that. Like it can't all be on us building a talent map.
No, you're right. A lot of it has to be professional development. I mean, when I write my articles, I always talk about the importance of continuing to learn and to continuing to push yourself, because if you don't, you're stuck in complacency and you're waiting for other people to do things for you that you should be doing on your own. Yes, the internal company mentorship programs are important, but if you're not pushing yourself and not guiding yourself, then that can be a problem.
I had actually an engineer as a career counseling client who came to me, and I forget what it was, and it's not important because I didn't understand it anyways. He said that he lacked some experience, that all the jobs he was looking at, they all required experience with whatever this thing was. So I told him that there's no way he's going to get the experience, but he can show that he understands it by writing posts on LinkedIn. And he didn't have a clue. So I Googled the topic, sent him a link to a government report, and said, start writing posts. Base it on the government report, and then move on from there. And he actually got a job. And he said to the employers, I have never done this, but I've written about it. Perhaps you've seen my posts on LinkedIn. They read the post, they liked it, they realized that he understood the topic, and they gave him a chance.
I love that. That is such a fabulous story. And in fact, all of the stories have been incredibly good. And there's a ton of tidbits. I don't know if you guys have been noticing, but I've been like
writing
pages and pages and pages here. So I'm going to recap a few things because we are at the end of our time. And I can tell from the 5 of us here, I could ask questions. You guys have questions of each other. We could keep having this amazing conversation. And there's been so many nuggets. I'm going to just do a quick recap because what it turned out to be was nothing like I thought it was going to be, which is my favorite kind of conversation because that means I learned way more than I thought I was going to, right? And we're talking about skills that the first skill that is overarching is actually the one we ended with. It's the personal responsibility. It's the willingness to do what it takes to show passion and to be able to articulate experience in ways that we may or may not have, but we have an understanding of and a willingness to learn more about. And if we're talking about company culture, corporate culture, you know, there's this concept of, we ended with mentoring. And I think that that's fantastic because there are 2 facets to that. We can find our own mentors. We can also look for organizations that believe in continuing to develop people for what it comes down to is problem solving. The problem solving ability of us to be able to figure out what we need to do to talk to the right people, to showcase the skills that we have, to understand what an organization is all about is just as important as taking those problem solving skills and applying them to where was my little note that I was going to go with this? Oh no, I lost it. I'm going to just go with it and go, I lost it. So have fun with that, everybody. You finish that sentence. And the concept being that our economy plays a part. How much people are willing to keep trying to find jobs, how much they're stepping back, as Bruce so preparedly came to the show with statistics. Super smart, Bruce, super smart. And then the other things, all of the tips that everybody talked about of what to say, when to say, and how much to say, especially our new coined phrase, diarrhea of the mouth. We that at some point during this show.
I love it.
And the fact that part of problem solving, it comes back to our willingness to dismantle the box, like what Amy said, in the sense that, you know, really question what we're doing and not necessarily question to question, but question to figure out, is what somebody's asking or what we're looking for fits into the values and the mission that we've gone out to seek somebody to help us fill and play a role in, as much as the people outside looking to connect with an organization or a client or whomever, right? To be able to have some sort of common connection to work from. Because once there's a common connection, we can find out if we're on track or not, as Bruce so articulately said, with understanding body language and all of the skills that go around how do you have a good conversation and build a relationship. So, and one of the things that I really liked about this show was the depth that we covered. We actually went deep on a few things. We didn't cover everything that I had set out to do, which again makes me feel really good because we were able to dig in and have a conversation about things that really matter. And what it comes down to is you be the judge. All of the program notes will be at the Voice of Bold Business under Program 1. And we look forward to seeing you at our next show.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.